Welcome to another PyPhysicsSandbox tutorial. This time we're going to look at pivot joints. But to do that, I need something to pivot around the pivot joint. So I'm going to create a couple of arms here. And I'm going to make one of them yellow here. And we can do a draw, just to see what that looks like. So I've got that arm, and then I'm going to make another one that is vertical instead of horizontal. And just because I like to distinguish colors, I'm going to make that one green. So I've got these two pivot joints here, or these two arms, rather. Now you can think of a pivot joint as a thumbtack, and you're going to stick it through the shape, and it's going to stick it to the background. So the shape will not then be able to fall due to gravity, except around that pivot joint. So in my case, I'm going to stick a pivot joint right here in the center of that box, and right here at the end of that box. So this top one is going to be able to swing down, but not fall any farther than that. And then this bottom one is going to be able to rotate around the pivot joint, but not anything beyond that. So let me go ahead and stick my pivots in. So when you create a pivot, you give it a point where the thumbtack is going to be, and then you connect it to the shape that you want to be tacked to the background. Let me create another one here, and yes, I had to work a little bit to get the points here exactly right. So if I go ahead and run this with just with the draw, I can see that the pivot joints draw is a black circle, and they show where they're going to be. So now that I've gotten that right, I'm going to come down here and change this to run. And I can see that they do swing around the pivot joints. Now, more interesting though, for me at least, is what happens when you hook motors up to these things. And then run it. So now they rotate. Each of the shapes rotates, again rotating from the center, but constrained by the pivot. So the top one, for example, rotates around the pivot because that's all it can do. It can't rotate in any way that would move that end that's thumbtacked to the background. So the rotation has to happen around the pivot. So you can combine pivots and motors to do some pretty interesting things. So that is our tutorial video on using pivot joints.